devil in disguise. Ooh, you fooled me with your kisses. You cheated and you schemed. Heaven knows how you lied to me. You're not the way you seem. You look like an angel, look like an angel, walk like an angel, walk like an angel, talk like an angel, but I got wise. You're the devil in disguise. Oh yes, you are a devil in disguise.
Welcome to Saturday, everybody. I must admit I am slightly concerned because I have not been able to reach Quinn. And of course, Saturdays at 6:30 are supposed to be special episodes with Quinn. And today our topic was slated to be about the King, Elvis. And I am a little bit at a loss because we were just hearing a cover, of course, of the famous song Devil in Disguise. Quinn has been preparing a whole episode for us about the King, the Covenant, and the time phone hack, and I did speak with him earlier this morning, so I'm hopeful that he's just getting to a destination with some good internet. But that's a little bit, we haven't heard from Quinn, so we'll wait a little while for him to begin. But what we basically do in preparing for these shows is he gives me an overview, and of course I'm reviewing his videos that he's posting throughout the week. Everybody saw Quinn and I in LA last week. If people aren't catching Quinn's daily live stream updates, you can subscribe to the Quinn Michaels channel on YouTube, and I saw this video 6 hours earlier today, and I spoke to him on the phone quite extensively after that, hoping he's all right. I'm sure he is. Something else must explain his delay here. People can also follow Quinn here on Twitter, at Quinn Michaels on Twitter. And while we're waiting for Quinn to arrive, I would remind everybody that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored news resource. If you like the interviews, if you like the reporting, the investigative journalism, please become a sponsor. It really is important. I know everyone is very conditioned to watching things on YouTube, and they're monetized through other means, advertising, etc. There are no ads on Crowdsource the Truth videos. There's no monetization on the YouTube platform. So we really are relying on members of the Crowdsource community, people who watch the show, to become sponsors. I personally think it's the best way to keep the news honest. We don't want one monolithic controller, whether that's Google or CNN, New York Times. The advertisers that they are beholden to obviously have undue influence on what they can report on and how they would report it. Let me try Quinn again. He usually sends me a text in Skype when he's ready, and that has not been forthcoming. Thank you, David. People appreciating the graphic for today's show. Of course, it's a famous picture of Elvis that has been modified for this parody of Elvis. He's holding a ripe peach, which slightly resembles an anatomical body part. And I'm not really that well versed in Elvis's discography. Now that I've seen the title of the song, Devil in Disguise, of course I do recall that that's an Elvis song, but I did not know that. Quinn has been doing a lot of research into some really interesting facts about Elvis. Of course, people, I think, remember that Elvis was in the Army, and Quinn, again, has prepared quite a bit of research with regard to the exact training that Elvis had there in the Army. It's my understanding from speaking with Quinn that Elvis became addicted to methamphetamine after his time in the Army. I think people know that later in his life, Elvis had some unfortunate drug problems may have been the cause of his death. Elvis, of course, was one of the original superstars of music, and I always found this kind of strange, this Elvis and Nixon meeting, but you know, who knows? Television was big, and presidents around this time became aware, or I should say more aware, of their PR needs and their public perception. Nixon had a lot of problems with the younger generation at the time, people protesting the Vietnam War. I think Nixon did a lot of crappy things, including being the head of Operation 40 as vice president under Eisenhower. And Operation 40, of course, was a collection of CIA assassins who went around the world doing extrajudicial assassinations of people that were not in line with the United States economic or political interests. Of course, these guys in Operation 40 had their sights set on Fidel Castro in 1960 when John F. Kennedy was elected president, and no, Quinn. Many people would say that members of Operation 40 were angered when Kennedy failed to provide air support for their raid of Cuba intended to overthrow Castro. And of course, JFK famously vowed to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and blow it to the wind. He objected to the notion that the CIA, or what we've now been calling the deep state, would tell the president where the United States would go to war. And many people would say that Watergate and all of the controversy surrounding Richard Nixon might have had more to do with the Kennedy assassination than with spying on George McGovern, Nixon's Democratic opponent in the 1968, I believe, election. No, it must have been 1972. Anyway, I'm vamping, to be honest. I'm not sure where Quinn is. I know he was going to talk about Elvis Presley's drug use. This Devil in Disguise song was definitely of interest to Quinn. I don't know if he was aware of that particular song before I brought it to his attention. One of the things that Quinn mentioned was the women in Elvis Presley's life. Of course, he famously met Priscilla, who would later become his wife, when she was only 14 years of age, very young. And this, of course, is the age that Quinn's son, Trenton, has described as ripe, according to the Process Church. Becoming 14 is, you know, the age at which, I don't know what, I guess you get fully indoctrinated. I was looking forward to hearing from Quinn what that ripe age would entail, but Priscilla was 14 years old when Elvis met her. I mean, this is not news, I don't think, to most people. We also, I think I might have brought it to Quinn's attention in one of our earlier broadcasts that if you go to Elvis's home in Memphis, Tennessee, he has his private jet on display and you can go in it. And one of the things that I found sort of intriguing about it was Elvis actually had a portable phone on the jet, and so he was way ahead of his time. I think this was, you know, part of where this whole time phone hack idea came from. Where do we see that phone? This is the interior of Elvis's jet, and of course I think it was very unusual for individuals to have their own jets at the time that Elvis did. Lisa Marie was the name of the jet. And Elvis would, I guess, fly around calling people, doing what Quinn would categorize as a time phone hack, because most other people would obviously have to either make a phone call and then get on the jet or wait for the jet to land. It's very hard to find a photograph of that telephone, but I remember distinctly seeing it when I got on the jet there at Graceland. I certainly hope that Quinn is okay. Quinn has left the building. He hasn't entered the building. Yeah, the report does sound quite intriguing, and I know that Quinn had some good information for us. I'm not sure what to say. Quinn's been doing his daily updates. He's there in Shasta. You know, one of the things that Quinn had mentioned to me is that he's running into quite a few people who seem to be acquainted with that other resident of Mount Shasta who's known to people on YouTube who are probably watching this channel. And Quinn told me that more than 2 individuals had approached him while he was in Shasta, and they were acquainted with this other person, and I find that very strange. Right, Kennedy, I don't know if it's a time zone thing. How are you, Kennedy? I know Kennedy's in close touch with Quinn as well. He said 3:30 Shasta, 6:30 New York. What we usually try to do is either 6:30 or 9:30 on Saturdays as a little tip of the hat to the 9-3 Society. And I always consider that, 6:30 in New York, 3:30 in California is sort of an encoded 9-3. And sometimes when he or I need more time, we're just going out at 9:30. But yeah, I tried him on his phone, I tried him on Skype, and I tried him on text. So Kennedy, if you've got a way of maybe Discord, I don't know if anybody's got a way of getting in touch with Quinn, we can wait a little while longer. As far as what Quinn has been reporting on lately, it's, he's really underscoring the research that we've been doing. Quinn, everyone knows, is trying to rescue his son Trenton. His mother is a member of what Quinn believes to be the 9-3 Society, a sect of the Process Church. And he and I have been doing quite a lot of investigation into the Process Church and its various members. We were in California just last week, and many people saw us there at Venice Beach. And again, I don't purport to know anything about Charles Manson, and we weren't even specifically investigating Charles Manson. We're investigating particle colliders and secret societies, and Charles Manson came into that research. So I don't believe it's reasonable for me to be, or anyone to be, expected to know everything about every topic. And going around and asking people things is part of how we learn more about it. That trip to Venice Beach was a bit of an impromptu switch of plans. Quinn and I had been planning on interviewing someone who we had met and spoken with the day prior, but obviously people are somewhat reluctant to be interviewed by people they don't know about sensitive topics like this. So that was admittedly not a fully planned out episode, but we got some interesting insights from some people there in Venice Beach. I mean, again, the people who were making comments saying, oh, that's a waste of time, they're obviously not digging into what's in there. We met some very interesting individuals who had a lot to say, and sometimes, people who would be easily dismissed by some might in fact know things and have witnessed things. That guy that I was talking to was a really interesting guy. He had ice blue eyes, and this guy here is a roller skating musician who many people recognize from Venice Beach. And again, it's the whole point of the crowdsource process is not that I am expected to or even purport to know everything or necessarily anything. It's about going around and gathering information. This guy told us about someone connected to Manson bringing him to a lawyer having to do with his music, and just the fact that that lawyer was brought up could lead to something. So Tyler in the Dome is asking for a call line for people to call in. You know, it's tricky. We tried that, and Francois de Puerco called in on that other show that I was on. But, you know, I mean, while we're waiting for Quinn, it's Tyler in the Dome. You can, oh, here he is. Perfect. All right. There we go. Quinn. Let's see if we can get Quinn here. Can you hear me? Yes.
Tyler in the Dome is asking for
can't
a
hear
call line for
You
people
can't
to
hear me?
call in. You know, it's
Okay,
tricky.
hang on a
We
second.
tried
Forrest.
that, and
You can't hear me, Quinn? Stay there. Hang on one second. I got it. Quinn, how about now? Can you hear me now? Quinn?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, cool. We got no video on you, my friend.
You got video?
Do not have video on you.
Is that better?
Yes, that is better. Whoops, I think I shared the wrong screen with you. Glad to have you with us, Quinn. I was getting a little bit worried for a moment there.
No,
But-
I'm in the forest. You know how phone things go in the forest.
Right. Actually,
Sorry, I'm late.
no, don't worry. I don't really know how phones go in the forest, but I can certainly imagine it might be tricky. Ladies and gentlemen, Quinn Michaels. Hello, Quinn. How are you?
Hello, everybody.
I was just a little
Sorry, I'm late.
concerned because one of our adversaries is frequently sending people to speak to you there in Shasta. I wanted to make sure nothing untoward had gone on. But I
Nope.
was recapping some of what you and I have been speaking about in the past. I was encouraging people to get onto the Quinn Michaels YouTube channel and subscribe and support Quinn's research and just share the videos, share the channel, join Quinn on Twitter, and you can get into the Discord chats. I believe if you become a patron of Quinn on Patreon, you can sample an early version of the Indra.ai, which is a forthcoming artificial intelligence that's going to do all kinds of interesting things. Quinn, I'm very pleased to see you looking well, my friend. How's it going
Thank
there
you.
in Shasta?
It's going wonderful.
Good.
You know, if you call being approached by people telling you stuff about people you know on the internet wonderful.
Well, let's save that for another discussion. I don't want to give anybody an opportunity to strike the video, but
Yeah.
I do want to turn our discussion towards today's topic, which of course is Elvis Presley. And is Elvis the devil in disguise, Quinn? We're going to be talking about the King, the Covenant, and the time phone hack today.
Woo!
So what have you got for us, Quinn?
Well, you know, when you and I started talking about Elvis and his first wireless Motorola, cordless phone and digging into the wireless phone patents, Elvis came about. And I didn't really dig too much further into it based on the phone because the research took into a different sort of direction. But I recently did a revisit on the Elvis research because I was doing research on the June 14th date that we'd been talking about.
Right, stop the sacrifice. Very important
Yes.
date.
So, and when I was doing that research, Elvis popped up, and Lisa Marie was, I believe that was the name. I often confuse Priscilla and Lisa Marie, but the mother.
Priscilla
her and
is the
Elvis,
mother. Yeah.
yeah, her and Elvis got married when she was 14, or
Right.
got involved together.
Right.
And then I started reading further into it, and Elvis was stationed in Germany, went through specialized tank training, which would put him in the realm of signals intelligence, or the process church that we've been researching. And I came across research that while he was in Germany, he had been introduced to methamphetamines, which is a process church drug.
How do we know that? How do we link meth to the process church?
Well, because methamphetamines, one of the places that it was originally brought into the United States was through Portland, Oregon.
Really?
It was brought in through the ports in Portland, Oregon, and then it was transported around the country by process church members that were doing, Hell's Angels, drug trades. A lot of them were from a lot of the research I found from process church was the early ones in the 60s. They had a lot of problem with people turning to Hitler worship. So I started connecting Hitler, process church, methamphetamines, and Elvis popped back in, who also, not just his wife, but he also had several other girls of age 14 that he was known to buy clothes for and to fraternize with. So he had an established pattern.
Yeah.
He loved televisions, telephones. You know, he bought televisions, I believe, for his whole army regiment that he enlisted into. So the more I traced it, the more Elvis seemed to be having patterns of being a very high-level process church member, using music and influence to change the perceptions of the American public.
Now, Quinn, have you ever visited Graceland and gone to see Elvis's home?
I have not, no.
It's quite interesting. And, you know, one of the things, you talk about Elvis's affinity for television and telecommunications and things like that. They make a point of showing you that he had this television room, which, you know, these were the largest, this is like high tech for the time. These were the biggest televisions available. And they made a point of saying that Elvis liked to watch every channel at once. So he had three televisions in the room because he could watch ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Yes. And so he was fascinated with communication systems.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be early cellular or wireless telephone technology or television technology, wanting, you know, TVs for every station. It just shows more and more that he may have known something. And then you look into his connections, I believe it was with Nixon. Him and Nixon were also very well connected. And Nixon was a big part of communications with setting up bugged rooms in Watergate and needing the technology to facilitate such things.
I did always find that connection between Elvis and Nixon kind of odd. I mean, even this photo is just so bizarre. Nixon was so against counterculture, and of course Elvis wasn't a hippie, which was, you know, Nixon really didn't like the hippies because they were anti-war and pro-marijuana, and, you know, I believe it was Nixon who started the Drug Enforcement Agency in 1972
I believe so.
or 3.
Where he started the first department that was a different name that got transferred into it. But that's what began the war on drugs. That's around that era as well. So all this stuff is very influential to society because it influenced people to come later based on, I mean, look at how many Elvis impersonators we have in the world now.
Yeah, Elvis has been remarkably influential. There's this article here from LouRockwell.com that I can't say I'm directly familiar with, but this came up when I searched for Nixon and the DEA. But this is talking about the real reason Nixon created the DEA. I've always felt that there was an odd connection between Richard Nixon and George H.W. Bush. And Nixon had this kind of strange relationship with the CIA. I was saying this before you came on the call, Quinn, that Nixon, as vice president under Eisenhower, was in charge of a CIA operation called Operation 40, which was a collection of 40 of the most elite assassins. And Nixon, as the vice president, sort of controlled that in some way. And this included guys like Frank Sturgis, E. Howard Hunt, G. Gordon Liddy, Felix Rodriguez. All these guys were associated with H.W. Bush, and they wanted to take out Castro, and they also purportedly participated in the Kennedy assassination. So this whole Nixon DEA thing, we know that George H.W. Bush was involved in Iran-Contra, bringing drugs into the United States.
And that also goes back to George H.W. Bush was reported as being in Tyler, Texas, where the Tyler system was developed at the time of the JFK assassination. So now you're really connecting the intelligence system or the communication system. We're connecting that to now Nixon, to Watergate, to the Bush created in Tyler, Texas, to, you know, Elvis, to record recordings. I mean, this thing really is a very extensive network of, you know, intellectual individuals who had access to the technology no one else could touch.
Right.
And then anyone that talked about it was immediately charged with treason.
What do you mean?
If you go back into the history relating to the Sig Sally architecture, nobody ever spilled the beans on it, ever. Because if you did, it was immediate treason and death.
Wow.
like these ladies, like we found a video in my research where one of the ladies who in her elderly years was talking to a child, and she said, well, we used to work with codes in my day and no one ever spilled the beans, because if you did, they had a guy in the room with a gun that would just take you out and shoot you.
Wow. Why did that lady not get shot?
Because it was way after the fact. She was already elderly, and the system was released to the public knowledge in the 70s, I believe. So the system existed for like 30 years as a top secret system that if you talked about it, you pretty much got shot.
And now, of course, there's a Sig Sally exhibit at the National Cryptologic Museum, which I didn't even realize was a museum. But if people are not up to speed on Sig Sally, again, this is the type of stuff that Quinn digs into on the Quinn Michaels channel there on YouTube. But so, Quinn, you're saying that Nixon or Elvis would have had specialized signal training in his role as a tank operator, or what exactly was Elvis's role?
He would have been made privy to it, because the Sig Sally system, what made it unique was that they pressed records for the encryption keys. So they were doing record pressing for encryption. And you had Elvis, who was a recording artist, and you had the CIA with Nixon, who wanted to hide messages and records using the CIA Sig Sally encryption technology. So you're starting to see the connection with the process church, the encrypted technology, the record pressing, the music stars. It's creating like a full circle.
You know, what's also coming to mind for me, Quinn, is that this whole concept of presidents and music stars is something that we've been seeing lately, of course, with, I don't know that we can equate Kanye to Elvis in any way, but he's definitely hanging out with Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Got a sort of a Trumpian hairstyle in this photo, color-wise at least.
Yeah, it's a common pattern with people who are members of that group, is they team up like that. And some of the things that Trump says and some of the things that I found that Kanye say, in my opinion, illustrate that they're both part of some combined effort. Like Elvis and Nixon, because the early systems required using records for cipher disks. The people in the record industry who are the best record pressers would most likely have also been Sig Sally operators or encryption systems operators.
Because well, it's certainly a way to disseminate an encrypted message broadly and in plain sight, where if you just said to someone, hey, have you heard the latest Elvis record? And that operative knows to go and get the record and do whatever with it, there could be an encoded message on the record.
Yeah, and they would have special record players that could read the record differently than a commercialized record player. So, and you can find that information if you just look at the record pressing technology that was specifically developed at Bell Labs. First Sig Sally was developed to embed messages in recordings and create encryption disks. And they used to ship the encryption disks all over the world on the boats, because they wouldn't ship them commercially, so they would send them on like aircraft carriers to various bases, and then they would keep a stockpile of encryption disks, so that way they could decrypt messages over the wire.
I see. So in this Sig Sally thing, it's talking about, maybe it's a different one here. So you're saying that the records served as a one-time pad? Is that what you're talking about? Is that the...
Yeah, the one-time pad records. So one-time encryption and decryption.
I'm just looking for that exact reference here. One-time pad principle. So, okay, so here people are saying that Wikipedia is CIA, and that's fine, but it's giving us some information here. It's saying that the insecurity of most telephone scrambler schemes led to the development of a more secure scrambler based on the one-time pad principle. Is that it?
Yeah. And that used like records for encryption disks and stuff that were very advanced for the time.
I see.
If you go to, I think it's like Encryption Museum, they have an article about the record encryption disks.
Is this the thing that's saying they used a random noise mask to encrypt voice conversations, which had been encoded with a vocoder?
Yes. So they used a vocoder, which is also really big in the music industry, used for making electronic sounds, digital transmissions. You know, the wah, wah,
Yeah,
wah.
Akon loves the vocoder.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone loves the vocoder. So the vocoder was developed for the Six Alley system, and so was this really advanced record pressing technology.
Hmm.
So you can see the use of just those in the rap industry because the vocoder allowed them to encode alternate messages underneath voices. That's one of the things the vocoder was really good for, is I could sing a song and then I could use a vocoder and I could encrypt a message into that record just by sending the message through a vocoder.
Hmm. Now, Quinn, when I was very young and first got into computers, I had a Commodore Amiga, and I was fascinated. It was one of the first computers, or at least one of the first that I was aware of, that had the ability to sample sound. And you could take in sound and edit sound and manipulate it. It was very primitive, obviously. But one of the things that I did was I took the Led Zeppelin song Stairway to Heaven and I sampled it, and then I played it backwards. And I'm going to play that right now. I don't think you'll be able to hear it, but there's purportedly a hidden message in Stairway to Heaven. Actually, I guess we're going to probably get a copyright thing for this, but we'll see what happens.
Not if you play it backwards.
Well, I thought that's what this would be, but it's so this is not well prepared. But there's, during the segment of the song where Robert Plant sings the words, "There's still time to change the road you're on," you play that backwards and it sounds pretty clearly like he's saying, "My sweet Satan." Now that could be a coincidence.
No, that's part of the process church. They train their people to speak as well in reverse speech as in forward speech.
I see.
It's a training method of their operatives. So that's actually like a documented practice among Aleister Crowley followers, is to learn how to speak as well in reverse speak as is forward speak.
But what's the use? What's the point of encoding that message backwards in a record?
To be able to speak forward and pass reverse messages in natural speak. It's a human way of encoding messages like Pig Latin, but a little more advanced. So if I'm a process church member and I know how to do reverse speak fluently, I can pick out messages that are encoded into a record by these advanced vocoders with record pressing technology. Or I can have a very specialized player that will then reverse it and then play it at a certain hertz or BPMs and get a different message out of it.
Sorry, Quinn, I've mistakenly conflated auto-tune with vocoder.
No, the auto-tune is a form of a vocoder.
Oh, okay. There we go.
It is. The vocoder was the first one, and then the auto-tune is a more advanced form of a vocoder. Like, the vocoder was the first, like, robot voice.
Well, it's just a shortened, condensed voice encoder, right? Vocoder.
Yeah, it's a voice encoder. So, like, the auto-tuner is a voice encoder. Like, the whole rap industry lives off of this technology that was developed for Six Alley. And the women would actually use the keyboards for it because they had to be specialized in its operation until they worked with the record industry to produce a commercially viable solution. And then once they had the vocoder commercially viable, they could encrypt messages like no business.
Well, and the thing that's just occurring to me as we're speaking right now is that the reason why, if you wanted to disseminate encoded messages in plain sight, you're not going to just get some unknown, American Satan or some unknown band. You want those records to be going out. I mean, Elvis records went all over the world. So if you wanted to encode a message in an Elvis song, you could say, "Hey, operative in Mount Shasta, did you get the new Devil in Disguise record from Elvis? You might want to listen to that forward and back." And there could be some message in there.
Exactly. And that's how the message passing would be, that you couldn't be held liable, because it was like, "Hey, I was just telling my buddy to listen to the new Elvis album."
Exactly. See, Quinn, you're a genius. You're hitting on something that I wanted to discuss, but didn't exactly want to discuss. Because you see, this notion of being able to pass messages among operatives without actually directly communicating, it's a powerful technique, and it's something that is still being utilized today, I believe, and certainly preserving the ability to say, I've never communicated with so-and-so, and be able to pass a polygraph test or any number of possible levels of scrutiny could be very important. And in fact, the people passing the messages may not even be aware that they're passing messages.
Well, they would be aware, but they couldn't be held liable because what they said isn't, you can't say on a polygraph. You know, you can't really be like, hey, did you tell so-and-so to listen to Elvis? Yeah, I'm an Elvis fan.
Right,
so
that's what I mean.
So when you start getting in the middle of it, and that's why I'm lining up patterns of music artists to like Sony Records, because Sony Records had that technology from Bell Labs. Right? RCA had that technology from Bell Labs. Everybody, the two big boys and all the big people, they wanted that voice encoder technology. They wanted that record pressing technology because it was better than anything they had. And it would make sound better. It would make music more appealing to an audience. So the people that didn't understand it were just like, yeah, give me that new advanced piece of equipment that makes this new amazing music.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, the example that I'm thinking of right now, it's got to do with our same favorite guy who's sending people to visit you there in Shasta. A lot of people know. Perhaps he might be. Maybe they're operating on their own accord, coming to visit you of their own volition. Many people are aware that a rather frivolous lawsuit that I've been referring to as a fake lawsuit from a real idiot has been brought against me, and there have been some interesting developments in this lately. I'm on pacer.gov right here, and I don't know if I've really discussed this with you extensively, Quinn, but there have been these notices filed in the matter lately, and they are coming from a Mr. D. George Swigert, who should not be confused with YouTuber George Webb. This is someone who operates on YouTube under the name Dave Acton. And I'm bringing this up because this declaration on the part of Mr. Acton goes to great lengths to describe how he has never emailed with Robert David Steele, how he has had zero contact with Mr. Steele, no Skype messages, no phone calls, no email messages. Now, he does say, or any other means of communication with Mr. Steele, but I don't think that precludes encoded messages that could be transmitted in, I don't know, cryptic, bizarre YouTube videos, perhaps. It is, I'm not saying he's doing this, but it's certainly a thing that could be done, putting out videos on YouTube that seem sort of non sequitur, but could have encoded messages.
And you're talking on a subject that I haven't spoken to directly, but that's one of the indicators that I use to identify the agents on YouTube is people who use similar speaking patterns, use same words, use same scenario descriptions to identify a possible encoded language.
So you mean if someone were to start off a video each time by saying something like, I don't know, apathetic CIA troll Dave here, that might be a cue that there's a message there?
That could, if that's repeated with a certain amount of times, that could be seen as what's called a trigger indicator. You know, like, hey, this is an order call. You know, so they have certain keyword phrases that says, oh, pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that.
Right.
Do this, don't do that. You know, hey, I'm eating potatoes. Who's the potato? You know, you find out what the references are, and then a lot of what I'm doing, what I base, like, you know, when I make a video saying, in my opinion, you know, we have some Frosties or, you know, these things, it's because they're using the same speech patterns or the same speech cadence that would denote passing some type of encoded message that could then be put through a vocoder, or could be put through a reverse speech analyzer, or could be put through some type of de-encryptor, or put through some kind of encoding type. Like if you look at a document encoding type, you could have a different encoding that'll translate one word to another word. Right. So there's all these indicators that show that certain groups of people are actually passing structured packets. And in programming, a packet is like, packet switching network. You send a packet, the packet either gets accepted or rejected based on structure. So
Right.
a lot of these people are sending speech patterns that are formulated as the same packets, which means something is processing that to decide whether or not to take action.
Right, right. Now, again, the comments that I've made about Mr. Swigert being a CIA contractor, well, those are based on statements that he's made, things like apathetic CIA troll. He's a self-described apathetic CIA troll, so I presumed he meant he was somehow affiliated with the CIA. If that was a mistake, then perhaps I was out of turn in saying that. He does go on to describe in this letter that he was in the U.S. Air Force and that he provided radio support. I mean, this sounds like signals intelligence type stuff, right? Radio operators in the military would be familiar with that technology, wouldn't they?
A military radio operator would be a signals intelligence specialist. It'd be SIGINT, as they call it.
Right.
Anyone in it's called, you'd be in like telephony, SIGINT, anything that deals with digital or analog communications is considered to be, comms or signals intelligence.
So sort of high frequency communications between base camp and in-flight helicopters. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
It's curious that he mentions Honduras and El Salvador, but leaves out Nicaragua. I mean, again, I presumed from his statements that he was captured by the Sandinistas. The only interaction I'm aware of that U.S. military personnel had with Sandinistas was during Iran-Contra, which was found to be a CIA drug operation. So again, my statements are just extrapolated from things that he's said. And of course, Robert David Steele has told us that he is a former CIA clandestine case officer. So these sound like two individuals that would probably be very well versed in coded communications and mechanisms of maybe they've never communicated with each other directly, but certainly if an encoded message were sent to a third party who they're both in communication with, who they both make YouTube videos with, perhaps that is a way of indirectly communicating and preserving the plausible deniability of being able to avoid perjury by entering legal documents that say things like, I've never communicated with so-and-so.
Yeah, that's secondary, or third-party communications. It's very common.
Right.
And especially since we're dealing with people who are purported CIA and purported Air Force and in radio communications, we're really dealing with people that would be trained in, counter-espionage, signals intelligence, encoded message passing. I mean, you name it, people like this would be trained in that kind of behavior or that kind of environment.
I agree,
Yeah.
Quinn, and I think that they're exhibiting signs that indicate they might still be using some of that training to do various things.
As they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
All right, so I think we're getting somewhere with this. It's possible that Elvis, as a former military man and a world-famous recording star, could have conceivably been co-opted to be involved in some sort of mass encoded communications plan. We're not saying that happened, but it's easy to extrapolate that sort of idea. And I mean, what you've identified about his fraternizing with 14-year-old girls certainly puts him under suspicion of process-like behavior.
Well, the underage girls, the methamphetamines, which his drug use obviously was well known later in life because he passed from it. His troubled relationship with women, he was quoted as saying he wouldn't have relations with a woman after she had had a child. So he had a lot of really personality traits that are starting to hit markers, as I call it, as being a very easy compromisable recruit for the process church of the time.
I do believe his mother died when he was pretty young.
Yeah, I believe so too. But his mother and him had a very unique type of relationship from my research. But more of the signs relate to his drug use, relate to his use of military-grade technology and his involvement with known underage girls and his connection to like Richard Nixon and stuff really starts bringing up real heavy process connections.
Do we know when he got that phone, that cordless phone?
I think it was in 1968.
Huh. Wow.
I think 1970, something like that.
And
68, 70.
I mean, did he just buy it, or what was the deal with that?
I believe he was part of an initial program of people that were selected to receive them.
This thing is talking about Elvis's phone bill from April 2nd, 1973. Should we look at that? Maybe he's been calling Cy Hirsch. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So that's interesting. Why are they showing us Elvis Presley's phone bill? Well, this is his phone number. If you could time phone hack Elvis, you could call him.
We should talk to someone about that.
Wow, I wonder who he's calling here. Clearwater, Florida, Chicago, San Jose, California, Monterey Park, Denver. Huh. Wow, a lot of phone bills for Elvis Presley here posted. We got to try to find out more about this phone. So this is a picture of it from 1973, and you identified that George H. Swigert received a patent for a wireless phone in 1966. But of course, patents are frequently issued many years after the invention of a device. Do we have anything else connecting these things?
There's a few things, but they're loose connections right now. You know, just the things that I've been hearing from the people that have been approaching me talking about this individual in real life that are showing conclusive patterns to other people as part of the Process Church.
Do you want to share any of that? Is there, I wanted to ask you if we could get some of those guys to join us on the broadcast.
I'm working on it. I was hoping one of them would have emailed me before today. That way we could have brought him on with us this weekend, but he didn't reach out to me in time. But I've had two people that have both approached me in real life who were acquaintances of Mr. Swigert, had told me that he drives around in a very advanced SUV with communications equipment, picking up drifters and hitchhikers.
Dangerous business. I hope that's incorrect.
I do too, but I don't know these people who approach me, but I've had two people in real life approach me out of the blue who were acquaintances of this gentleman, say that he is known to have very advanced communications equipment, mobile communications equipment, as well as two people have said he's known to pick up hitchhikers or drifters.
I've definitely heard him talk about creating mesh networks, and he obviously is very sophisticated with his radio technology. He's made a number of videos about ham radio or CB radio or whatever kind of radio he's working with.
Yeah, so he's very, very versed in signals intelligence, very versed. And so we're starting to really see a pattern form, because one of the things with the Process Church in the 60s that you and I talked about is how they had people going up and down the coast picking up hitchhikers.
J.H. Armstrong Quinn is telling me that there's a Scientology church in Clearwater, Florida. And of course, you've identified that Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were doing wife swapping and all kinds of things.
Yes.
And that Scientology is an offshoot of the Process Church.
Yes. Yeah. So that's another connection as well, that I'm really going to start diving into the Scientology aspect as well, because I have a personal connection to that system.
To Scientology?
Yeah, because in the late 90s, I worked for the computer company that installed their mainframe.
Huh.
So I was aware of what kind of background checks just a network tech had to go through to get access to their clean room.
Really? And what was that like?
Well, the person that I talked to that did the setup on the equipment in the 90s said that his background check was more extensive than an FBI background check that the Scientologist did on him, just so he could get into the clean room to install the computers. And once he got into the clean room, he was forced to sign an agreement that said he could never talk about it ever. Huh. Because they had a super advanced what's called VAX VMS in the 90s. The Church of Scientology, under their church in LA, the big one,
Yep.
they have a really big giant server room
Yeah. I'm going to bring
underneath.
that building up right now so everybody can see that. It's
Yeah.
right across the street from one of my favorite chicken places in LA.
Yeah, and so in the late 90s, I worked for the contractor that installed the desktops and installed the server environment in that location.
Right. Now, so there were actually two Scientology buildings, Quinn. When you and I were in Hollywood just a
Yeah.
week ago or so,
There's the recruiting center on Hollywood Boulevard, and then there's the church that's on, I believe it's on Sunset or Santa Monica.
it's on Franklin, if I'm not mistaken, but I
Yeah.
think we're looking at the recruiting center right here. Yeah, this is the building that you and I were standing outside of just a couple days ago, right there on Hollywood Boulevard. And just flying around the map by memory, the castle-like, let's see, I think it's right over here by the 101. I think this is it. This might be it. No, that's the Hollywood Tower. That's an apartment building. The chicken restaurant's over here somewhere. Well, they definitely have got extensive facilities there in Hollywood. And Quinn, there was something very strange that went on with Scientology and their whole process of getting tax exemption as a religion. And there was like, they broke into an FBI office or something like that at some point. Have you ever heard about that?
I've heard allegations about it, about how they had influences in the government, about how they went through the difficulties to be classified as a religion, you know, their problems, so to speak. But I haven't dove too much into them since I left the company that I used to work for that installed the systems. But it's very funny that they're coming back now, and not many people even know about the system that was installed in the church in the 90s. The people that are involved in it also are people that won't talk about it. So
Well,
I know that the Church of Scientology in the 90s had a system capable of AI.
huh. That Vax VMS.
Yeah. It was a
The
digital.
Celebrity Center is the thing that I'm thinking of in Hollywood here.
So and
There
that's
it
where they
is.
collect a lot of the data and stuff. And it gets pretty confusing, but if you stay focused on like the Aleister Crowley, the L. Ron Hubbard, the Jack Parsons Process Church connection to like NASA and stuff, it maintains a course.
Interesting. Well, all right. So what else have you come across this week, Quinn, that we want to cover today?
Well, the big thing is it looks like the hacker group is planning a counter operation to rescue missing children for June 14th to stop people from paying attention to stop the sacrifice.
Really?
So
Who's that? Cicada 3301?
yeah, some people on Twitter, they came out with another campaign to stop the time phone hack that happens on the same exact day as June 14th.
Really?
Yeah.
And the
So in
purpose
June-
of this time phone hack is to stop the sacrifice. You're anticipating that there's going to be some mass, human sacrifice on the 14th?
I don't know what it's going to be exactly, but based on the research, the Process Church builds extensively underground.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever they plan their rituals underground, we tend to see signals of it above ground to let their operatives know to plan something.
Uh-huh.
And based on this new operation that popped up this week for June 14th for March to Save the Children, and between the Strange Angel coming out,
Right.
there's another thing that's coming out right around the same time that looks like a distraction, that it really looks like the process people are trying to plan something.
Huh. Now,
And
what's
so-
this thing that they're trying to do to stop the time phone hack? Here's a Twitter user who is time phone hack.
Yeah, that's the time phone hack user. They got to the account before I could.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it just seems like there's a lot of resistance getting in the way right now of people recognizing that June 14th is a date that they have something planned.
Well, and
What
I
it is-
actually just landed on your tweet about Elvis and the 14 connection. So does the number 14 hold some significance? I guess it must.
It does. It holds some significance in Egyptian mythology, and it's also in Buddhism. It's also the age at which a child can become a monk, or a child can take it on a religious life.
I see.
And so a lot of the occult practices mirror Buddhist practices for various reasons. So I'm going with a lot of what I find in research. I'm going with a lot of the June 14th stuff. I'm going with what's popping up. And there's a lot of things that show that the 14 is related to some type of ripening age, as my son put it.
Uh-huh. Oh, and what about this bizarre image of Mr. Podesta with the 14 and the fish on his hand?
That's another one of the 14s that I found a real connection to, that he said it was about some kind of youth camp, I believe it was, but he had a 14 fish in his hand, which means, like, what's your 14 fish? What does that mean? So that's another one of the pictures that I use as evidence of the importance of 14 in their circle as well.
And also, I think many people have noted that John Podesta has got some pretty banged up fingers with like these giant scars and everything. And we've heard Marina Abramovich talk about, cut into your finger and eat the pain and everything. Obviously, anything could have caused these injuries, but I think John Podesta is kind of like an office lobbyist dude. I don't know why offhand he would have such bizarre scars on his fingers.
Well, he does have an outdoor oven in his backyard for cooking stuff that I read about in the Hillary emails. And the
he does seem to be a chef, and those guys can cut up their hands and burn their hands pretty badly.
Not like that, though. One of his hands looks like he put it on a hot pipe.
Yeah.
So a lot of these links to 14, a lot of, there's just a lot of relationships to it. And, with the Elvis stuff, with the process church stuff, all these people follow ritualistic paradigms.
Uh-huh.
And so, also when I was going through the process training camp, you had to be 14.
Take us through that again, Quinn, because I know you've said it a number of times, but it's one of those things that I think people need to hear again and again to fully absorb what happened. Because you've told us that Trenton has said to you that your family that you grew up with is not your real family, and that you were kidnapped as a baby. I mean, this is certainly a wild story.
Yeah. But outside of the wild story, the family that I grew up with sent me to these summer camps on a ranch starting when I was 14 years old. Mm-hmm. So when I was 14, they put me through this company called Psi Seminars, which is very similar to Nexium. Uh-huh. If you go to Wikipedia and look up large group awareness trainings, you'll see a list of companies in Nexium and Psi Seminars are in the same list of large group awareness trainings that came out of that mindset. And so when I was 14, they put me in the first basic training. It was a 4-day training that I went to as a 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. And then after I went to the basic training, that following summer, I went to the training camp on their ranch, where I was trained in various activities, like conquering fear and climbing up telephone poles and jumping off and being hung off of cliffs and stuff.
So here's a link to Psi Seminars, New Warriors.
So, and you should see, if you're on Wikipedia for large group awareness training, you should see Nexium is in the same list.
How do they spell that? NVX?
Yeah, NVIXM. It should be in the Wikipedia page.
I'm not finding it immediately, but I could be spelling it wrong.
They should have a listing of companies if you're in the LGAT.
Oh, yeah. Well, LGAT Techniques, Anti-Cult Movement. This is an interesting page for people to look at. Cults in our midst. Multi-level marketing is here. That's interesting. I seem to remember someone who used to appear on this show quite a lot was involved in multi-level marketing. Yeah. Well, the reason I brought this up, Quinn, is because as we were talking in LA last week, as fantastic as the story sounds, your parents aren't your real parents, kidnapped as a baby, this happens. I mean, you know, these cults kidnap children. I mean, you may well be a victim of child trafficking, kidnapped at birth or shortly after.
I believe I am. I don't like talking about it because it's a difficult subject to really be open about. Because I believe I am myself, because when my son told me that this was happening in my life, my family changed their phone numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you told me that in December when I came to see you in New Mexico at the hospital.
Yeah. So personally, it's a difficult thing because I personally really wish there was some type of authority that could use some kind of, authority to help with it. But, based on the laws of the United States, there really isn't any help for me because, I have no connection with my family. I have no connection with my son or my son's mother. And this was something that my son told me, and my son's mother has my son classified as a special needs kid, so no one will believe him. But this whole story was based on something that my son did tell me. I did go to the trainings as a kid, it was a very strange situation. But the Process Church people are very real. They deal with human trafficking, they deal with drugs, they deal with conspiracies, and the people I've met that are involved and have told me they're involved, when I ask them how they get away with it, they say they all team up on the people that try to reveal them and make the world think they're crazy.
That seems to be happening to you and me.
Yeah, so I've actually had members of their group who have identified themselves as going to these sex parties tell me that's exactly how they do it. When someone like you and me comes out and tries to identify them, they all gang up on that person and use their fame and use their fortune, and they defame the person, and they make the world think that person is crazy. So these are all tactics that this group has been doing since like the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and they keep doing the same measure, just more advanced with their technology.
Right.
And that's really what I'm trying to relay, because my personal story is it's very heartbreaking. I have a hard time dealing with it. The fact that there's a kid involved and that the kid told his dad that he was kidnapped, and the kid's part of the trafficking of it all, and everyone's involved in some illegal kidnapping. That's horrible.
Yeah. Well, again, this is a story that you started telling me back in December, but it didn't really click in my brain until last week in LA that you were kidnapped by this cult, and they've been a part of your life. The other thing that occurred to me is, you've spoken to us about Aleister Crowley's great-grandson or whatever he is, where Aleister Crowley impregnated his great-granddaughter, and his great-great-grandson was supposed to be a conduit for his soul or to clone him or something like that.
That's what he told me. That's what he told me. That wasn't what...
Could be untrue.
But he had evidence that he was who he said he was, so I didn't generally doubt him, and he pretty much looked like a spitting image of Aleister Crowley at the time, and this was, over a decade ago.
Right. Yeah. And irrespective of the truth or distruth of that, it certainly raises the possibility that these types of cults have got bizarre spiritual rituals that involve descendants of specific people, or the son or the grandson. So what I'm wondering is, could you have been kidnapped from someone of some kind of prominence, and for whatever ritual they're trying to do, perhaps you're not directly important, but your son may be of some great importance, which is why they need, or the grandson of whoever your biological father might be. Could this motivate a kidnapping? Again, it doesn't need to be logical. It's just this bizarre spiritual ritual of some unknown ritualistic cult.
It would appear like that. It would, on a lot of levels, it would appear like that. That take into that consideration that my birth family would have been someone of influence in their group, and they would need access to a grandchild, and they would know that I wouldn't want to partake in that activity.
I think that may have happened.
And that's very along the lines of what my son said, where he said that, they just had to keep me under control and keep me out of their way until they could complete whatever it is they want to complete.
And of course, you've said Trenton's mother approached you rather aggressively, made sure you guys got together.
Yes. Yeah. And then once she got pregnant, she hated me pretty much.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's unusual behavior. Most young women who become pregnant, I would think, generally want to at least try to have some relationship with the father, even in an unplanned pregnancy, at least try it. You're saying right when she became pregnant, she just never wanted to speak to you again.
Yeah. I mean, if we're getting really personal, I drove her from Phoenix, Arizona to Portland, Oregon, and when I was faking that I was asleep in another room, I overheard a conversation with her mom that she had right when she found out she was pregnant, like a couple weeks after. And she was telling her mom how the kid was hers and she was going to make sure that I was never around. So she had this planned from pregnancy. So something in the background. And then when I confronted my son's grandfather about his involvement with the Masons, he never spoke to me again. When I tried to talk to his family about it, they defamed me.
Right.
So the more we get into it, the more it looks like everybody around me acts like, the Swigerts, and they're all part of some network of people that all say the same thing,
And Quinn, I certainly don't want to get personal, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I think I want to ask you something that I haven't discussed with you previously, and
I'll just ask.
Yeah, hang on 1 second. I need to retrieve a document here. I need just 1 second. I got to take the headphones out.
Okay.
Now, I mean, again, I don't know. You and I have not discussed this at all prior to now, and I have no idea what your reaction to this is going to be. And I'm certainly not trying to do anything to betray your trust. And the only reason I even mention it is that on Monday or Tuesday, this document will be public. So I've got here another declaration from our friend, Mr. Swigert, and this is going to be submitted to the court where the legal matter is going on, and he's talking about my, according to him, alleged assassination attempt. I've merely stated to Dave that we have evidence that he was aware of your location in Vaughn, New Mexico. And I believe what Dave is trying to do is to get me to reveal that evidence in the public forum of YouTube to compromise the source of that evidence, which I will not do. If this absurd matter actually becomes a legal case, then that evidence will come forward, but I'm not going to succumb to Dave's nonsense. He refers to you here, he says, now this is the third declaration of D. George Swigert, and now comes D. George Swigert, a non-attorney layman, he put the lame in layman, to inform this court of recent allegations and accusations made by defendant Jason Goodman concerning an alleged attempted murder plot by the undersigned of Mr. Goodman's associate known as, quote, Quinn Michaels, a.k.a. Corey Atkin. Is that your real name, Corey Atkin?
It's not my real name, it's my birth name.
Ah. So how
I changed it.
You did?
I changed it legally when I was 19 because I wanted to get away from my abusive family.
Got it.
And I didn't want to use my birth name anymore because my childhood was very abusive. And so when I was 19, I changed my name to Quinn Michaels. And my ID says Quinn Michaels. My social security card says Quinn Michaels. My job records say Quinn Michaels. The only reason he knows about my alias is because it has to be on my records for my court case with my kid.
Got it.
So they have to put my birth name on the court case. So that means he's got access to my court records.
But why would he have access to a civil case like that? Shouldn't it be a sealed record?
I don't know. I don't know how he knew my birth name.
Well,
I don't hide it.
No, well, thank you for telling me that. I mean, I wasn't aware of it, and when I saw this document, I was a little bit shocked. Just
the only reason I don't talk about it is I come from a very abusive childhood, like really abusive. And when I was like 15, I decided to change my name, so I took my middle name, which was Michael, and made it my last name. And my old first name was Corey, which was 5 letters. So I made it Quinn, 5, so it's like pretty cool because I like numbers,
It's a cool name,
and
man.
right.
The
So I
Mighty
mean, I'm not
Quinn.
ashamed of it. I
No,
mean,
no, nothing to be ashamed of. And the only reason I ask is that when I saw this, I was surprised by it. Again, I don't think that as Dave categorizes in this document, I don't think I have directly accused him of an assassination attempt. I think what I've said is that he
no,
was tracking you.
you said that he was aware of my location based on some contact that had
That's
been
right.
brought to your attention.
Correct.
And he's embellishing it, and he's including my birth name, so that way now, because my name's on record there, it gets logged in a system. So he's trying to create I believe it's like compulsory evidence or something like that, like circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, he's trying to do all that stuff to try to,
Yeah.
submit these documents in the court to do something. I will tell you, he's buying extremely premium laser printer paper, or perhaps this is a very, very finely printed document. It's not inkjet for sure. So I don't know. Mr. Swigert certainly has a lot of money.
So did he accuse me of like, what is he? Why is he even putting my birth name in your court case?
Well, because according to him, there's an alleged attempted murder plot, which I don't believe I've ever accused Dave of being involved in an attempted murder plot. I just said we have evidence that he was aware that you were in Vaughan, New Mexico on the evening that you suffered from a spontaneous collapsed lung, and you and I have just sort of.
I mean, I'm wondering now if he accidentally put in a Freudian slip like they did with other things in that
Right.
court case.
Yeah, who's talking about a murder plot other than him?
Exactly. We weren't. You and I were just like, someone knew my location in Vaughan,
Right.
New Mexico when
And
I
we
hadn't
were
told
just
anyone.
speculating if an electromagnetic energy weapon could cause a collapsed lung. We never said anything about a murder plot.
Nope. Never said anything about a murder plot. But he
So,
put it in a court case.
He did, yeah. It's nice. The more motions these guys file, the more they're revealing. So by all means, they should.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
I'm glad
yeah.
that he put that in there and got your attention, because now we get to talk about that guy put murder plot in a court case.
Pretty
Right?
interesting.
My kid's mom did the same thing. In my court papers, I got a suitcase in storage that shows her writing that same story for me in Oregon about how I brought the devil into my kid's life and how I was unworkable. And they did the exact same thing to me, but my kid's side, when they sent the court papers to me from there, it was like outlandish, and everything they were doing, they were accusing me of doing. I was like, I've never even talked to this woman, and she's saying all this stuff that I've never even said and did, and I was like, wow, she's just telling everybody what she's doing. So I think there might have been a murder plot against me now.
Right, based on what he said, right.
Based on what he says.
Very bizarre, very bizarre. Well, Quinn, our friend in LA has kind of gone silent, so I don't know if we're going to get an opportunity to interview him. I will follow up with that, and we will keep trying to do it. I want to wish you the best there in Shasta. Please be careful. There are a lot of strange people in the mountains over there, and
There is.
definitely want to remind people who are possibly not yet following Quinn on Twitter that you can find him there at Quinn Michaels, and you should definitely follow Quinn for all the latest updates on time phone hacking and to learn how you can stop the sacrifice. You can learn about Tyler, you can learn about Indra.ai, and you can follow Quinn's daily live stream updates on the Quinn Michaels YouTube channel. There's information there that's going to help you link up to Quinn's funding pages. He's got Patreon account. He's got oh no, you're not doing oh yeah, you are still. Are you doing Bitcoin? Yes. So we've
Yeah,
got
but
PayPal.
I'm getting ready to remove all my crypto addresses for now.
Yeah, I remember you saying you weren't that down with the crypto deal, but people who want to support Quinn can do that by going on to the Quinn Michaels YouTube channel and hitting up these links. And people who want to support Crowdsource the Truth, I would definitely say thank you and encourage that. effort. You can become a monthly sponsor by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. I do want to remind people that documents like this are being filed along with threatening directives from various individuals that I should, quote, lawyer up. And the reason they're doing this is not actually to fight any wrongdoing or to make anything good happen. It's because they're trying to game the legal system to financially strangle me. So the best way that you, as a member of the crowdsourced community, can stop asshat nonsense is by becoming a regular sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. $5 a month would really help a lot, and if you think about it, that's less than $1, $1.25 per week. And when you think about the number of videos that I'm making, if you feel like this video was worth even 25 cents, then please become a sponsor. And if you don't think it was worth 25 cents, what did you do wasting an hour and 15 minutes watching it? I want to thank my guest, Quinn Michaels. It's great to see you, Quinn. It's great to see you having a good time there in Shasta. I want to thank everybody for watching. I'll see everyone tomorrow at 3 for Sunday with Charles.